When building a personal knowledge system, one of the most important things you can do is create an efficient workflow for capturing new information. By the end of this video, you'll know how to create custom templates for capturing notes and project details into your org roam files. Stay tuned for more. What's up, everybody? I'm David Wilson, and welcome to System Crafters. In this video, we're going to talk about how you can set up capture templates for capturing common information you might want to enter into your org roam notes whenever you create them. So in the previous video, I gave an overview of using a package called org roam to build a personal knowledge base inside of org mode. As you start using org roam to store notes and information, it's useful to figure out the common details that you usually fill in for the things that you capture, and then create templates to streamline that process. As an example, if you often capture detail about books or research papers, there's probably a few different things that you're going to want to include whenever you create a new note, like the summary of the content, the bibliographic information, quotes you might want to use, or even links to topic notes where you expand on the ideas that you gained or came up with as you read the source material. So org roam provides a way to define templates for the information that you capture so that you'll never forget the important things that you need to include in a new note. So org roam actually includes its own specialization of the org mode capture template feature. If you've never used capture templates before, don't worry. Creating and using org roam capture templates is pretty straightforward, though there are slight differences. So if you've ever used org roam capture templates before, just sort of pay attention to the details because a couple of things are slightly different. So the thing to understand about org roam's templates is that they're used whenever you create a new note, not like org mode capture templates that can be used in various different places or creating like subsections of files and whatnot. Typically, the templates you create for org roam are used for creating new notes. In the last video, I showed you how to create a new note using the org roam node find command, which we bound to Control-C-N-F. So by default, whenever you use this command to create a new note, org roam is going to automatically create a .org file with a title and some metadata like the ID of the node, but with nothing else in it. It's basically just a blank file. But after you define your own custom note templates, you'll be prompted for which template to use whenever you create a new note. And this is how you decide what type of note you're creating and also the initial content that it's going to contain. And there's a lot of different ways you can customize that, and we're going to show you a few of those in this video. So, to understand org roam templates, let's start by looking at the default template that is defined as part of org roam. And we're going to do this by setting the org roam capture templates variable in the org roam configuration that we started working on in the previous video. If you haven't seen that yet, I'm going to include a link to it up here somewhere. There's going to be a little pop-up you might see, and also the link will be in the description. So this variable, the org roam capture templates variable, contains the list of capture templates that are used whenever a new note is created. And if you set this variable, you'll have to copy over the default template. Otherwise, the default template won't be available anymore because you're basically just overriding the built-in list of capture templates. So definitely, if you want to learn more about how to configure capture templates, read the documentation for this variable in Emacs using the describe variable command, and then it will give you a lot of info about what things you can fill in there. But we're going to look at what the default template that comes with org roam, what it looks like, so that you can tell sort of how the general structure of these things operates. So this is a basic capture template. It's the default template that comes in the box. And there's a few things that we want to point out here because when you first look at it, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So the first thing in the list is the key of the template. And this is actually a letter that's used to select the template whenever the list of templates is displayed to you. So it's usually a single letter that you can type to then select that type of template. The second string here is the full name of the template. This is what you're going to use to identify the template whenever you're presented with a list of templates to select from. The third element here is the type of text being inserted. There's a few different types of text that can be inserted, but for the purpose of creating new notes, plain is the one you're going to use most often. There's also one called entry that can be used to create subheadings inside of your note files, but we're not going to cover that in this episode. We may cover it later if people have questions about it. So basically use plain in almost all cases whenever you set up these templates. Also, there's this string here that has a %? In it. And this is the actual text that will be inserted into the body of the note whenever you create it with the capture template. But what does this %? Mean? This is actually a special syntax, which we'll talk about a little bit later. That's from org mode, not org roam. And this specific syntax means this is the location where I want the cursor to land whenever I have started this capture template. So whenever you have a more complicated capture template, you might want to have a specific place where the cursor starts so that you can start typing immediately into your template. And this % question mark is actually what will direct the capture template to place your cursor in that location. Next is this if new section. This is a keyword called if new, and then it has a list after it with the configuration for how these new note files are created, specifically the file name format and the header part of the file. Now, this is why org roam has such a long file for the notes that it creates, the org files that it creates, because it's basically encoding the timestamp of creation into the file name. And they do this to ensure that the files that are created are unique, just in case maybe you try to create a file with the same name as another node in your existing org roam notes. So I don't recommend changing this, even though you actually can change it if you want to. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But at least for now, let's just leave it the way it is. This line, you need to have it in every one of your capture templates. So just keep in mind that this thing, you'll basically be copying it into all the capture templates that you create. And also here, we are setting the title of the document based on the title that you type in for the note itself. This $sign with the curly braces around it, where the curly braces around the word title basically says insert the title into the document. So that's how whenever you create a new org roam note, the title gets inserted so that it can be seen in the document itself. And this last part is unnarrowed T, which is not something specific to org roam, but it actually is something for org mode templates, which org roam is specializing. And this says that whenever you create the new capture entry, don't constrain the file to only the section that's being created, just show the entire file. It's a little unfortunate that you have to put this in on every template, but I think the creators of org roam wanted to make sure that you had full flexibility if you did want the creation to be narrowed. So by default, you do have to include this if you don't want that narrowing functionality. And if you don't know what that means, just be sure that you include both of these lines in every capture template you create, just so that you don't run into any trouble. So aside from the template key and the name that we set here in the first line, the two things that you're probably going to be interested in configuring are the initial text of the note and the format of the file name. But like I said, let's leave that alone for now. And the initial note text actually has its own special format, which can be read about in the org mode documentation. And I'm going to show you a few things about that so that you can know how you might be able to use it to improve your capture templates. So if you don't have the configuration from the first video, I've included it here in the show notes, which you can find in the description below. And this is basically the starting point that we're going to use for the rest of this video. So definitely copy and paste this into your configuration if you haven't done so already. All right, so let's take a look at how you can set up a simple capture template. And we're going to continue with the notes that we were using in the previous episode, where we're basically creating notes about programming languages. And we're going to add a template for capturing details about a programming language for all new notes that we create about programming languages. So we've got an example here. This is a template with a key of L and a name programming language. And it has a string here that basically has the initial contents of the note file that we want to insert. Now, this is going to be actual org mode formatted text. And if you're not familiar with what that looks like in just a normal text file, if you maybe have your org mode customized to where it looks prettier than just a normal text, the star at the beginning is like a first level heading, and then a space, and then the name of the heading. So we're basically creating a heading named characteristics. And actually, we probably don't even need a colon on that. And then we're putting in two new lines after that first heading. And then we're putting in a bullet point with the label of family. And then we're doing the thing I mentioned before with the $sign question mark that says this is where the cursor goes whenever this template is used. Then we drop down to a new line, add another heading called, another bullet point called inspired by, drop down by a couple more lines, then add another top level heading called reference, and then add a couple new lines to complete the file. So this is basically the entire contents of the file. And whenever this gets inserted using the capture template, it will actually look like a normal org mode file. And we haven't changed these two lines that I mentioned before, the if new and the unnarrowed. So we're basically just copying those along to this new template that we're creating. So now what I'm going to do is take this configuration for this template and copy it over to a more plain Emacs configuration. And I'm going to go drop it in after the existing configuration that we have here. I'm just going to join these lines together. You can see my key bindings that I'm pressing here in the mode line if you want to take a look at that. I'm going to format this a little bit. So, excuse me. So what you're seeing here is that in this configuration, in the custom section of the use package expression for org roam, I'm setting the variable org roam to capture templates to contain the values of this list here. And let me actually just format that a little bit better for my own sanity. It just didn't work, whatever. So we're inserting, oh, that's why. We're inserting this new template. Let me tell you why that didn't work. Whenever I get that working. There we go. So I forgot that I had a closing parenthesis here that needed to be deleted because I'm basically adding another item to this list. That's sort of the problem with configuring these things, is that you're having to do a little bit of Lisp coding to put things in the right place, but don't be too intimidated by that because you'll get pretty used to it. So we've inserted the new template here with a key of L called programming language with the text that we had talked about before. And what I'm going to do is use Control-Alt-X to unbalanced parentheses. So let me use check parens here to find out if I can see where the parenthesis issue is. I think it's actually at the end of this line here. I forgot that one that closes that. Control-Alt-X, now that evaluated successfully. And what we can do is to try to create a new note using Control-C-N-F to run that org roam node find command. And I can type in a name for a new node, because that's the whole point here, is I'm trying to create a new node that uses one of these capture templates. So I'm just going to type in JavaScript. And then what's going to happen is that since I've added a second entry to this capture templates list, now org roam is going to ask me which template that I want to use for creating this new note. So we see we have the D for default, so that's the default template that basically already comes with org roam, and then also the L entry that we just added for programming language. So in this buffer, I can press L, and now what you'll see is that it pulls up a capture buffer with all the content that we put in that string in the capture template, but it's actually spread out in the normal formatting you would see in an org mode file. And the cursor is dropped right at the location where we asked for it to be, right after family with a space after the colon. So in this case, we can say this is in the family of like C-like languages, I guess you could say. Maybe I'm wrong about that. We can also say that it's inspired by Scheme, believe it or not. It actually was inspired by Scheme a little bit. And there we are. We have some basic details about the JavaScript language that we've entered here. And also, if you wanted to add references like links to documentation about JavaScript or maybe YouTube videos that you wanted to store, you could put those here in this section. And whenever you're finally ready to store this note, just press Control-C, Control-C. So this is how capture buffers work, and this is how it worked in the previous episode when we created new notes with just that default template. You always have to confirm the capture of the new notes. We need to press Control-C, Control-C here, and now the JavaScript note is stored. So this is pretty nice because we were able to streamline the process of creating a new note about a programming language using some information that we know we want to fill in commonly about those languages. Another thing I could have done here, which I forgot to do, is to insert Scheme using Control-Alt-I and then put Scheme here. So we could actually make that a link, which is actually better because we want to have links between the different notes in our knowledge base to build a graph of knowledge. All right. So let's see. That's all we wanted to say about that. So this is just an example of a basic template that you could use. Now, let's see. I think I missed something that I wanted to talk about earlier. Interesting. I must have deleted that section. So anyway, what we could do, what I was going to say is, like earlier in the slides, I had something about basically if you wanted to create a, oh, I did talk about that. I remember now. So we can add even more structure to our data entry by using org mode's template expansion syntax. So this is some of the place where the org mode style of capture templates comes back into play, because there's this format we can use to automatically prompt ourselves to put more information into our capture template. So the first example of a template we talked about in this video, which I just remembered we finally did, is that maybe you want to capture details about literature material like you read in a book. So let's create a template to capture some of the things we mentioned before, and this time we're going to add custom prompts for certain details we want to fill in, like the author name and the year that the book was published. So what I'm going to do is grab this configuration here, and I'll explain what it does when I paste it over. So I'm going to jump back over to the init.el file here, and then paste this in, actually right in this location. Okay, and then I'm gonna go back and use, I think it's Control Alt and then backslash to format those. So we're creating a new template called book notes with a key of B. And in this one, we still have the same if new and narrowed entries, but we are adding some more interesting things to the insert string that gets put into the capture or the document that's being captured. First of all, we have the author, and we're using this syntax with %, caret, and then curly braces around the name of a prompt that we want to use to insert information. So what this means is when the capture template sees this string, it's going to create a prompt in the mini buffer area to ask you for what the author is of this book. And then whatever you type in there is going to be inserted into the capture template after you type it in. And then we're doing the same thing for the year here. So we do %, caret, year. And then another thing we're doing here is we're using $ brackets title. And this is actually something that comes from org Rome, I think. So we're inserting the title of the note that we're creating. So let's imagine you're creating an entry for a book. The title of the note is going to be the name of the book. So we want to take that same title and insert it into the document inside of our structure here. So that's why I'm using the $ curly braces title. So just keep in mind that the syntax is slightly different between these two things. The org Rome value that we're passing in is got the $, and the syntax for org mode has the % here. And then also we have a summary section where we drop the cursor after we're finished typing all this information in. So let's make sure that this is going to evaluate. I'm going to use Control-Alt-X to evaluate this whole configuration structure. So now our new template should be included. And now I'll try to create a new entry, Control-C-N-F. I'm going to type in Dune as the name of the entry because I'm going to write a note about the book Dune. And we're going to select B for book notes here in the capture template list that comes up. And now you'll see that the capture template is here, but the focus actually isn't in the capture template. It's actually down here in the echo area in the mini buffer, and it's asking us for the author. So I'm going to type in Frank Herbert, which is the name of the author of the book, and then it's going to ask me for the year, and that is 1965, I think. And now it's fully filled out the template that we passed in here with the name of the author, the year, and also the title, which we pulled from the title of the note. And the cursor got dropped right down here to the summary section so we can start typing our summary, like the spice must flow. So now we can press Control-C, and then we've created our note about the book Dune. And we could add whatever else you wanted here. You could add your personal rating of the book. You could add anything else that's really relevant to you. And link to other documents in your org Rome notes as well. So it's a very cool thing that you can do to add these extra prompts so that you get prompted for that information so that you don't have to go and look at all the sort of blank spots in the document where you need to go fill things in. Let's see, what is the next thing in this section? Yep, so there's other interesting things you can do with template expansion prompts like the ones we just used. So be sure to visit the org mode manual to see what else you might be able to use from that. There's quite a lot of other things you can insert there, and you might want to take a look at those and see what might be useful to you. Okay, so another useful template that you might want to create is for capturing details about a new project that you're starting, particularly like the tasks, the goals, and any important dates that you want to remember. So here's a template which basically sets that up, or sets up a new project file, which I obviously forgot to write at the end of the sentence. Sets up a new project file. So I'm going to copy this over to the configuration, and then I'll explain what these things are going to do. So let's drop down right here, put in this new project, and I'll just leave it indented where it is. Let's not bother with that anymore. All right, so we're creating a new template with a key of P. The name is project. And let me drop this down one line as well. So we're going to have a goals section. We're going to have, this is where we're going to initially put the cursor whenever we create this note. We're also going to have a task section, which has an initial to-do item that you might want to maybe change or add to-do items to. And then we have a dates entry where it's just blank. You can fill it in if there's any important dates you need to remember. But the interesting thing about this particular template is what we're customizing in the if new line. So instead of just having the title as the only part of the headers of this template, we're actually adding another header after a new line here. It's a header called file tags with a tag name of project. And what we're doing here is adding a tag to the file that we're creating called project, which gives us some benefits later on where we can actually query for any notes that have this tag of project using OrgRoam's database API. And whenever you start getting more into customization of using OrgRoam, you might actually be able to use this for things like getting a list of all your project notes files so that you can put them into your org agenda, so you can automatically generate that list of agenda files. That's actually something I've been doing in my own configuration for a while, and it works really well. So we'll cover that in another video when we start talking about more deeper customization. But for now, we're just going to see what it looks like to create a note that has a tag attached to it. So this should evaluate. So let's use Control-Alt-X to evaluate everything. And then I'll use Control-C-N-F. And let's say new project. I'll type in mesh here because it's the name of a cool project. And I'll type in P for the project. And now I can put in the goals of the project, write a cool compiler. And then tasks, you see we have an initial task entry, which actually is a to-do. We can fill in our dates here. But we also have the file tags entry here at the top, which says this is a project. So that actually tells OrgRoam and also org mode that this file actually has a file level tag called project. So now I'll press Control-C, and we've created that entry. Now, I'll tell you another cool thing. If you use Vertigo or Selectrum and you have the marginalia, or marginalia, however you want to pronounce it, package installed, these tags actually show up in the completion list. So if we were to use Control-C-N-F now and type in mesh, you can't really see it here on this side, but if you look all the way over to the right side of the completion area, you can see that the tag project shows up here. And this even works for multiple project or multiple tags. So if we say scheme as a tag, let's say, you probably wouldn't want to do this in practice, but you could do it. So Control-C-N-F and mesh. Okay, so I think that I didn't put the right syntax in. Let's see. Maybe I do space. I probably don't have the right syntax, but just for the sake of showing what that could look like, you can have multiple tags on a top level file. Somebody will correct me in the comments, so just take a look at the comments to see what the right syntax is supposed to be. But the point being, if you have a good user interface system like Vertigo or Selectrum with marginalia set up, you can actually see what the tags are. And in fact, Control-C-N-F, I can type in proj, and then it will actually filter by the tag as well. So you can filter all of your notes by tag using something like Vertigo. So I did make a video about setting up Vertigo and marginalia. If you're interested in that, check out the little pop-up that will show up here, and that will take you to that video. Also, I'll have the link in the description below. But definitely recommend setting up Vertigo or something like it to get this functionality. All right, so now what you probably have been thinking this whole time while looking at the configuration that we're putting in here is that it looks really ugly to have to edit these template strings inside of your Emacs Lisp code. Well, the good news is that you don't have to do it that way. You can actually save normal.org files containing the contents of your templates so that you can edit it like a normal file and then have the configuration actually load that up whenever your template gets executed. Basically all you have to do is just create a file for that. So let me just jump back to init.el, and we're going to take let's say the book notes string here. I'll use just normal Control-X, Control-F, and I'll go into my road notes folder, and I'll create a new folder called templates, and then booknotetemplate.org. So I'm basically create a new .org file under the Roam notes folder, just in a subfolder to keep things clean. And now I'll paste this in, but I'm going to re-edit this a little bit to make it look like an actual org file. So we're going to drop down a couple lines here. We're going to leave author the way it is. We're going to delete the new line and insert a real new line. Just kind of clean this up. And then make sure that this summary heading shows up in the right place. And then put our percent question mark here where we expect it to be. So this is what we want our actual file to look like whenever the capture template is used, and we can represent that directly right here. So I'm going to save this file. It asks me if I want to create the templates directory because it doesn't yet. I'll say yes. And now that file is saved. So if we jump back over to init.el, we can just delete this line and replace it with a new list called file, and then a path to the Roam notes /templates /booknotetemplate.org file. And now whenever we reevaluate this, it's going to actually use the contents of that file. In fact, let's do something a little bit different so that it makes it obvious. So we're going to put a new heading in just so that you can see that it works. And we're going to find out whether it works because I haven't actually tried this beforehand. So we're going to see how well my preparation works here. All right, so Control C in F. And for a book, let's say like, I don't know, Programming C++. I don't know if that's a book. And I'm going to use the, book notes, B. And now you can see that we have the it worked up here. So it actually did pull that template from that .org file that we created. So thankfully I don't look like a fool here. And also it still prompts us the normal way like we saw before to look for the author and for the year, etc. But I'm just going to go ahead and cancel out of that because we don't need to create another entry. But it just goes to show you that you can change all of these to just use actual .org files for your template source, so you don't have to edit your code like this, because it's really tedious to try to create a template in this way. So it's better to use .org files for this. All right, let's see if there's anything else I wanted to say there. Nope. Okay, so you can also customize the default template, so you don't have to leave it the way that it was before. You can change it to whatever you want. So let's try to insert the date when the note was created inside of that default template. And we can use this, we can do this by adding the string, which is basically a heading in the file, the hash plus date colon, and then %u. And this %u basically just inserts an inactive timestamp in org mode parlance, which basically is just a timestamp in the file. It puts it in the header string inside of the file so that it shows up at the very top. And we need to actually change the if new section for that, because if you remember from before when we set the file tags, we have to set this line which previously had title, but now we add this date information to it. So what I'm going to do is copy this over to the configuration. I'll just paste it in, and I'll go delete the other part that was here before. Now, let me just clean all this up a little bit, maybe. All right, and then I will use Control-Alt-X to run it. And now I'm going to create a new note. Let's just say test note, press enter. And then I'm going to pick default out of the list here. So I'll press D. And now we can see that we have a new date entry here. And this has, like I said, that inactive timestamp, and it has everything specified for us. We didn't have to say anything about what the format needs to be. It just puts it straight in. And that %u comes from that template expansion section of the org mode manual that I mentioned before. So go check that out to see if there's anything else cool that you might want to insert in your files by default. But keep in mind that if you change this for your default template, you also just need to go change it in all the other templates you defined as well, because it doesn't automatically get applied to all templates. That's both a good and a bad thing, because if you have something in your default template that you don't want in the rest of your templates, it won't automatically be added. But you also have to remember to go put it everywhere else if it is something common that you want for all of your notes that you create. And the other thing is that we can, I wanted to go back to the point that you can change the pattern of the files that get created for these notes if you want to. Let me cancel out this capture really quick. So if you wanted to, you could get rid of this bit at the beginning that gives the timestamp in the file name. So let me show you really quickly. Control C in F. I'm going to type in test note again. And in the capture template buffer, we can see down at the bottom, it says capture dash, and then it has the timestamp in the file name. So what we can do, we can cancel out of this, Control C, Control K. We can go delete this whole part of the file name template here, and then reevaluate with Control-Alt-X. Control C in F to create a new note again. We're going to just say test note because we never did finally create that. Select D for default. And now you can see that the file name here is capture-test_note.org. So we've gotten rid of that timestamp. So if you don't like that, you don't want it to show up in your note files, you can do that. However, just keep in mind that you might end up with file name collisions at times, and I'm not sure what the behavior is whenever you end up in a situation like that, but just keep it in mind if you want to do that. But I think in most cases, you're going to be okay if you want to take that out of the file name. The reason why is that in org roam v2, all your files are identified by IDs anyway, so the actual name of the file isn't really as relevant as the title and the ID after all. So the file name can be anything you want it to be. All right, I think that's everything for that. Yeah, so what's next? So org roam provides another useful feature for capturing thoughts and ideas that occur during the day called dailies. I didn't have time to cover that in this video because I didn't want it to be too long, so I'm going to make another video about that. I find this to be a very, very useful feature for things like keeping a journal or maybe like a daily log of the work that you do. or maybe even random things that you want to remember. It can also be a place where you can write sort of like the initial seeds of ideas that you have that you can use to process later and bring into your notes as really fully fledged notes. So it's a great feature. You're going to want to check that out. So definitely make sure you're subscribed to the channel in case you aren't yet, so that you get to see whenever that video comes out. All right, so before we go, I'd like to thank my sponsors. And these people have decided to sponsor the work that I'm doing to make videos about GNU Geeks and GNU Emacs, and I'm very thankful to them for their support. If you're interested in supporting the channel, definitely check out the links below in the description. I'm on GitHub Sponsors, Patreon, and LibrePay. It's a new option if you're interested in that. And I also have a link to PayPal for one-time tips if you are interested in that as well. And if you're not interested in supporting in that way, just definitely like the video and also any other videos that we post, and maybe just, you know, give them a click every now and then, because all of this stuff just gives food to the YouTube algorithm to tell them to promote my videos to other people. So that could be very helpful if you wanted another way to support the channel. All right, so thanks so much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, or maybe let me know if you liked the video at least. And until next time, thanks a lot and happy hacking. We'll see you.